Hello everyone, this is Arrow, and welcome back to Sundown Muna Podfics. Today we'll be reading a one-shot called Not So Common Sense by MothMothhMothhh. Summary. It turns out that people with quirks lacked something rather important, something that was tiny, little, minuscule bit important, something known as common fucking sense, or the 5 times Midoriya found quirked people without common sense, and the one other time he found another person who lacked common sense. Midoriya was, with the lack of a better word, rather confused. There was something off. It started when he was a child, raising an eyebrow as Bakugo used his quirk on a stationery and acted surprised when it blew up, evolving into confusion when his mother complained of wet sleeves when she didn't pull them up when washing her hands. Although it had taken him years to figure it out, he finally discovered what the issue was. It seemed that common sense wasn't so common after all. When Midoriya had encountered Nezu in the wild, he had been ecstatic. Not only was the man one of his favorite heroes, but there was also no way he'd have the same issues as the other quirked people he'd met, right? Hindsight was always 20/20, and the bright light of hope had made him blind. The teenager had skipped over to the principal, a smile wide on his face. The aforementioned smile, however, faded in a manner of not dissimilar to whiteboard pen when faced with hand sanitizer, wiped away with no hesitation as he watched the mammal attempt to walk directly into traffic. Midoriya wondered momentarily if the hero was part Leming. He hurried forwards, barely managing to stop the suited chimera from becoming well-dressed roadkill. Nezu-san, you can't cross in the middle of the street," he mumbled, eyes widening at his own words processed. "Not that I'm dictating what you can and can't do, of course. I just meant it as a piece of information." Nezu blinked widely, in a manner that reminded Midoriya of a frog. "Why not?" "Why? Because you get hit by a car. That's generally seen as bad." Midoriya spoke, brows furrowed in an unhealthy dose of concern at the fact that the apparent smartest being alive was making a hobby of testing fate in people's braking skills. "It's bad? Veterinary clinics tend to heal me pretty well." Midoriya felt the remaining dregs of color drain from his face. "You've been hit by cars before?" "Well, of course, we all have," Nezu answered, a half-puzzled, half-entertained expression forming on his face. Midoriya was aghast, jaw hanging open. "No," he squeaked out, pointedly ignoring the crack in his voice. "No, we haven't." Nezu made a chuffing sound, eyes twinkling with amusement. "Of course, and I suppose your luck quirk has nothing to do with that?" Resisting the urge to mouth luck quirk incredulously at the hero, Midoriya opted instead to choose a safer dialogue option. "Would you like to walk me back to UA to prevent any more vet visits?" Nezu queried. "I think I'll take you up on that offer," Midoriya replied, praying to the deities that the mammal's bones would look any more like a completed puzzle when x-rayed after their journey. During the journey, Midoriya discovered that not only was Nezu casually walking into roads, but in addition, he made a hobby of drinking tea. "Nezu, you are aware that mice are allergic to tea, right?" The chimera, who was part fucking mouse, nodded as he failed to see the issue at hand. Midoriya had been in tears by the time he managed to walk Nezu back to UA, and had practically run from the hero. On the other paw, Nezu had quite enjoyed the conversation and made a mental note to visit the boy at a later date. Midoriya stared at the other teenager in the teacher's lounge, avoiding eye contact like it was the cause of his physical pain. "Ah, hello there, Midoriya-kun. It's nice to see you were here so early," Iida called, body language calling the greenette over with a beckoning finger as the cherry on top of his metaphorical cake. Midoriya rather bravely did not burst into tears, instead opting to follow the unspoken request and shuffling closer to the other boy. "May I ask why you're in the teacher's break room? Of course, I understand if you'd like to keep that information private." I was told to wait in here for All Might-san. He said he needed to talk to me about something." Midoriya responded anxiously. "I'm sure it'll be all right, Midoriya-kun, and if you need any assistance, I'm here for you. I know we only met during lessons this morning, but I strive to be a classmate you can trust. Midoriya felt the familiar sensation of tears building up in his eyes before making their dastardly and traitorous escape down his cheeks. Thank you, Ida-kun. It means a lot, he responded. Of course. The background sound of the kettle boiling stopped, bringing the lack of noise to Midoriya's attention. Ah, the water boiled, Ida exclaimed, shaking his hands in excitement. The student happily poured himself a cup, adding ground coffee before immediately taking a large sip. Ow, he winced. It's hot. Directly after this statement, Ida proceeded to take another sip, reacting in the exact same way. Midoriya blinked. Ida-kun, have you tried waiting for it to cool down? He asked, tenderly reaching out to place a reassuring hand on the boy's shoulder. Ida's eyes widened. Why though? Inhaling deeply to assist him in his impossibly stressful endeavors, Midoriya sighed. So it will cool down. You won't burn yourself then. In a miracle of humane nature, Ida somehow managed to mimic the surprised Pikachu meme with clinical accuracy. It's really no surprise you came first in the written exam, Midoriya-kun. You are truly amazing. Yep, Midoriya responded through gritted teeth, forcing a smile. I shall strive and aspire to be as intelligent as you one day, Ida declared determinedly. Midoriya strived and aspired to be of the legal drinking age because Kami, he needed something to prevent him from going gray at 15. Ida, in a manner of dissimilar to that of a baby bird, imprinted on his classmate, followed Midoriya almost everywhere, looking to him whenever he had an issue he was unable to overcome. In a way, Midoriya was thankful that, unlike Nezu, Ida took his advice to heart and slowly managed to learn from his past and gain a semblance of common sense. Midoriya would happily admit that he was pretty fucking proud of his friend and his progress. All Might, 10 or so minutes after his conversation with Ida, had arrived and taken Midoriya aside to begin their conversation. Ah, Midoriya-kun, why are you sending your location to Ida-kun? Midoriya blinked. Because you've asked to meet me, alone, and I don't know you well enough to trust that you won't murder me and toss my corpse in a dumpster. The hero laughed. Ha, funny joke. Midoriya-kun, I'm the top hero. Of course you can trust me. Right. What did you want to talk to me about? Midoriya would have been bouncing off the walls in excitement at the fact that he's talking to the All Might, but after his interaction with Nezu, he'd learned to keep his hopes low and his dreams lower. Well, Midoriya-kun, if someone hypothetically were to offer you a quirk, hypothetically, what would you say? For hypothetical purposes, the quirk is a strength type. Hypothetically, of course. Midoriya squinted at the situation that was rather obviously not hypothetical, and felt true fear for the first time in a while. I'd fucking run, All Might-san. I've seen what those things do to people, and I want nothing to do with them. All Might frowned at his response. Will you take my quirk? The teenager stepped back, and the hero took a step towards him. That was all it took before the student bolted away while screaming about the stranger danger and quirk cooties. All Might attempted again on several other occasions, only to be met with the same response. He, however, did not learn from the past and attempted again every Thursday. Midoriya was looking forward to the sports festival. It was the best chance he had at giving the middle finger to pretty much everyone he'd ever met before UA. Of course, this wasn't accounting for the absolute jump scare that was Todoroki, taking him aside and asking him if he was Aizawa's secret love child. But that wasn't something that was exactly predictable. No, Todoroki-san, I'm not related to our teacher. And no, I don't refuse to use my quirk. I'm literally unable to because it doesn't exist. Midoriya resisted the urge to add on, like Nezu's sense of self-preservation, but it was a close call. You do realize that you're giving yourself hypothermia, right? He questioned in a rather desperate attempt to break the growing silence that was as painful as it was awkward. Yes, Todoroki confirmed, looking far too smug for someone who had just admitted to severely limiting himself occasionally resulting in injury for pretty much shits and giggles. Right. Why though? To spite my father, Todoroki replied as if it was obvious. Midoriya took a deep breath and attempted to recite the calming thoughts his also quirkless therapist had suggested to him. Okay, so if I were to remove my hands because my father wanted me to paint, would you consider that a reasonable reaction? Yes. Todoroki didn't even hesitate, and with that, Midoriya turned around and walked away, making a mental note to bully his classmate into Hound Dog's office for counseling as soon as he was able. After roughly 3 sessions, the teenager began to use both sides of his quirk. This had absolutely nothing to do with the fact that during Midoriya and Todoroki's fight at the festival, Midoriya had picked up a chunk of ice and hit him in the face repeatedly while saying, "Stop giving yourself hypothermia. Stop giving yourself hypothermia." Nothing at all. Hosu was on fire, and Midoriya was slightly miffed about it. Not only were the heroes with Walla quirks focusing on the Nomu instead of the fucking fires, but Iida had apparently decided to go murder a dude whose literal hobby was murdering people. Honestly, Midoriya blamed himself for not getting to the murder is bad part of his weekly lessons to Iida. Of course, Stain was pretty easy to take down when you had enough fridge magnets and power of not-so-common sense, but that wasn't the point. Iida, I'm really sorry to tell you like this, but murder isn't good. You should probably try not to do it again. Iida looked distraught, his expression matching the one someone might make if you put down a +4 in Uno on top of their +2. It wasn't against the rules, and Midoriya would fucking fight people who disagreed. It is? Before Midoriya could reassure him that yes, killing people is bad, he was rather rudely interrupted by a rogue Nomu burying its claws into his shoulders and dragging him off to a nearby building. The teenager was rudely dumped on the roof and had to force himself up to his feet. He squinted at the man in front of him. Shigaraki? Shigaraki squawked in surprise. How the fuck do you recognize me? I'm not even in the same outfit, he complained. Shigaraki, the student began, your face is uncovered. So? Izuku felt his hair turning gray at the statement, barely resisting the urge to throw his shoe at the man in front of him. So? I recognize your face from the USJ. It's literally villainy 101, to cover your face. Unable to resist the temptation, he added on, Are you new to this stuff? What? No, the criminal responded, turning slightly red. Kirigiri, get rid of him. He's bullying me. And with that, the pair's brief interaction was over. After finding Shigaraki's address, Midoriya began sending him images of the criminal with increasingly concerning masks badly photoshopped over his face. When Shigaraki had made eye contact with him at the mall later on, he'd fucking sprinted in the opposite direction while stifling sobs. Midoriya, like most people would be in the same situation, was rather surprised when he saw All For One lounging on his sofa like he fucking owned the place, and, as most people would, reacted accordingly. It was only due to his teenager's intense training that he was able to not only pick up the household washing machine, it lived longer than Colagon, and chucked it at the greatest villain known to mankind. In an instinctual response, All For One made an so smart decision to blow up the house. Midoriya was, understandably so, thrown back, hitting a block of cement in the descent and landing roughly on the concrete floor. All For One gasped in an overdramatic manner and rushed over to his still recovering teenager. Son, are you all right? Midoriya blanched, a look of horror crossing over his face as if he'd just been told that cats weren't the best. Son? He shrieked, scrambling backwards in a way that would make any egg jealous. He patted down his pockets in hopes of finding the gun that Snipe had happily handed to him when he'd asked for shits and giggles. Yes, Izuku, I am your father. He spread out his arms and took a step forward. Now this is where the issue lay. Midoriya, with his distinct lack of a quirk, found it rather obvious that the place his father had just stepped was directly underneath a precariously balanced piece of what used to be his student's room wall. His father, unfortunately, was not quirkless, the opposite in fact, and failed to notice it, even as it tipped over the edge and began to make its way towards him in a leisurely manner. Midoriya, having just met his supposed father, wasn't really looking forward to cleaning his blood off his new uniform and wrapped his hand around the grip of his gun and pointed and shot. The tranquilizer hit directly in the center of his forehead, successfully pushing him out of the way of the falling wall while simultaneously knocking him out. "Bullseye, bitch ass! Fuck yeah!" he jeered, pumping his fist in the air. Later, when questioned on how he came across the gun, Midoriya claimed to have found it in the rubble. He was more than smart enough to know that you're not supposed to snitch on the person who broke rules for you. The next morning, after he was half an hour late to class, he was able to use the hopefully once-in-a-lifetime excuse that his father had blown up his house. Aizawa was unable to remember the fact that the aforementioned house blowing up had meant that Midoriya was now living on campus, and therefore had no valid reason to be late. Alright everyone, that is the end of Not So Common Sense. This was so comical. I loved this so much. I was laughing throughout the whole thing. I think you could have heard me. I didn't want to record all my giggles because I don't like my laugh. But anyway, that was a really fun read. Thank you so much for listening, and I'll see you all soon. Bye.